gentlemen of the parliamentary, please don't be swayed by the fancy theatrics that all teams are throwing out.
Sure.
I'm going to clarify exactly what has been said. I'm going to prove the deadlock, and I'm going to tell you specifically why closing opposition fails utterly to engage on our unique expansive contribution. We're not only talking about punishments post-war, but during the war itself, in where the international unities have the better justification to intervene during the war itself. When we're talking about post-war itself uniquely and exclusively, those benefits or problem solvencies are extremely weak in comparison to during war interventions, which is why opening opposition has no difference itself to closing opposition. Basically, Suyoung just repeated what the opening half has said. Exactly, no difference at all. I'm going to make 3 rebuttals as to opening opposition and closing opposition as a whole, because they're 2 of the same things, right? One of the same thing. Okay, sorry. Trauma, whether the idea of morality and trauma. The idea is that adults and children are traumatized the same. The idea of atrocities and violence that you witness in battlefields, it is applied exactly the same to everybody else. So when you try to exclusively portray that trauma is a problem that only applies to children, we fucking beg to differ. Second of all, the existence of hierarchies that exist between soldiers and his commanders, right? This idea of hierarchy and coercion already exists from the very get-go, whether it's between adults and children alike. Sorry to mention this to you, we tell you again, the idea is distinction, is that the morality formation, that was the differentiation between the opening opposition and closing opposition, right? Seongjae did a fantastic job of providing you the mechanism that the idea of morality is informed through very simple accumulation of age. We asked the question, how is a 20-year-old soldier any different from a 12-year-old soldier when that 20-year-old has witnessed the same amount of war as that of a 12-year-old kid? The idea of morality is informed at the battlefields. That's a problem that no teams can solve. There's no difference in the idea and the absence of morality between child and adult soldiers. Opposition fails utterly to differentiate the two at a structural level. Second of all, how saying punishment is ineffective. They tell you that it's coercive. We already told you on numerous occasions that still people are already bound to the hierarchical structure of war itself and army, right? They still haven't engaged this, and they still weren't able to provide a mechanism how passing this motion would actually alleviate those power imbalances that currently pre-exist in the battlefields. Failure of opposition. So at the end, I'm going to tell you 2 different clashes at the end. The idea of morality and conceptualization, which happened mostly through opening half. And second, how protection of children, a solvency in this debate, was only mentioned by closing government. And when they tried to kind of disengage and dismiss us by saying that, oh, we're only going to talk about post-war, first of all, you need to provide us the mechanism how we can actually only exclude the context of war to post-war. The idea and the most damages are happening during the war itself, not post-war. Post-war is only reactive. We only give you the mechanism to do this at a preventative level. First of all, the deadlock that exists in opening half. I'm going to be the one to prove to you this. Please sit down. Okay, opening opposition says that morality isn't rationally formed. We completely agree. The idea of rationality probably doesn't exist 20 or 30-year-old soldiers who their entire life or experiences built upon battlefields. The differentiation between battlefields and liberal society that we are in right now is that nothing actually makes sense upon those battlefields. So when they try to differentiate adults and children into idea of rationality, that probably doesn't happen under even their status quo. So rather, the question is, how do we actually solve this problem? I'm going to deal with this in my second clash. Second of all, Suyoung adds 1 line of differentiation as to OO, that saying that children can't vote, they're uneducated. First of all, the chances are, if you're a soldier in Congo fighting for your ethnicity or religion and whatnot, you probably don't have the chance to vote anyways. Second of all, if the war is engulfed in flames and bullets and missiles, the chances are you probably still didn't receive education. So the question is, at the end of the day, how is it distinction actually apply in Congo, in Syria, or Egypt? No, they still can't engage with this context that was uniquely expanded by closing government. Moving on, the impacts of what will happen if we were to actually pass this motion, right? Second of all, we told you the clear mechanism on why international unities are completely failing to intervene in these issues. We all agree four teams that this is an issue of humanitarianism. It's basic human rights and how we protect it. Their solvency is extremely insignificant compared to our mechanism of solving this negative limbo or cycle. Here's why. The current division of politics that exists in the international society, it forbids us from the United States intervening matters in Syria. We still see interventions somehow, but it's over-politicized, which is why international unities can't be united to solve a common enemy, common goal that we see, which is violation of basic human rights. I'll take opening.
That's not the case. And second, in response to your new matter right now, if adults had the chance to get a vote in education, would you agree that these children were uniquely never had an education to be able to beg them to defer?
Sit down. Don't throw me a what-if situation. We're talking on a real-life basis, real experience. If you were to talk about it, you had your chance. That's not part of this debate right now. But moreover, why this polarization is actually bad. We prevent the actual interventions from happening when the only response coming from closing opposition is that it's post-war. That's not enough to completely ignore Sung Jae's speech when he told you expansively in a logical manner. First of all, we've told you when we're fighting for a common goal, which is infringements of human rights that we all should have, that we all should encompass. We tell you, human rights have no borders. International unities exist to protect this democratic value. We agree that many states have differing systems of governance. Respect that, but still we can't make compromise to a certain extent, too great to an extent that these ideas of human rights are being violated. So how is this uniquely solved under closing government? We now give a clear incentive. We give a clear depiction and conceptualization of what is being exactly wrong. So, and the comparative that we told you, why is it beneficial for children as well, clearly stands. We believe if these international unities were to extract these child soldiers out of the battlefields, first of all, the idea of morality can actually happen better under our side. Why? Because now they're able to think in a place where there are no bullets, where there are no gunfires, where there are no bombs. You see, we do this especially better because now international unions can extract these soldiers out. Second, we have better justification as to criticize these heinous leaders that coerce those children in the very get-go, which is why we have a more clear depiction as to what should we exactly tackle and criticize. At the end, opposition exclude this debate into only post-war. We were the only team that contributed and expanded this debate into further during wartime. Ladies and gentlemen, it's very clear we're advancing to finance. Thank you.
Yes, okay, thank you very much for that speech. If you're all ready. Yeah, okay, sorry. Now to close out this very exciting debate, I'd like to invite the opposition witness. Whenever you're ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, why do we send children under 18 to schools mandatory? Why are mothers encouraged to teach toddlers how to be kind? And why are children not allowed to vote in democratic governments today? Now this, I believe, highly depends on the nature of these young students or children in that they do not have yet formed a specific or a set or a strong value or judgment on their own values or even their identity to begin with. And that is why we strive that there must be a difference in which we try these war crimes towards these children. What is past is unfortunate, but what we can change in the future, we will try and strive our best to rehabilitate the children to make the future consequences better for all of humanity and the world. Now, engaging on some of the points from the closing government. Now, you mentioned that these war crime trials, and we can actually help these children even during war. But the thing about war crime trials, the most problematic thing that you have failed to notice is that all trials historically have happened after the war. Let's take an example of the Nuremberg trials after the Nazi failed and they lost in the war and they admitted their failure and their faults, and also in the case of Japanese imperialism when they were forced to secede, and then they had trials after the war ended. This can only happen, these wartime trials can only happen after the win and loss is decided, or either when they are having or during an armistice where all the fighting and all the conflicts has seceded and are resting for a certain period of time. Even if it happened during war, children should be, even if it happened during the war, children should also be tried differently, because our characterization of children that they have not learned and formed identities or strong identities or their own moral values yet, it still applies during the time of war. So through the implementation of different trials during war, we can still try to rehabilitate these children to opt out and try to form a better society for the future. Yes, sir.
So, by your logic, children are amoral, adults mobilize the war, but still an action has been caused by a child. In that case, why do you still give preferential treatment to children if proportionate treatment will be given to adults, like you agree?
Let me extend another point on my extension. Now, since the government team thinks that results are only what matters in the case of trials, like for example, like children, for example, a little kid shot 50 people and an adult shot 50 people. Because they committed the same crimes, they should be tried the same. Now, their policy in trying to take account of these results and not the consequences, and actually consider all the situations and the nature of the perpetrators who have actually committed these things must be taken into account before the trials are kept and before the trials are actually held place, and these limitations should be placed as something that is unbreakable and as a prerequisite in the beginning of these trials. No, sir. Okay, so the clear extensions that the closing opposition has brought to the table is this. Different from the opening opposition and all the other members of the government table, we want to say that these categorically, the children are not the cause of the war, and it's unfortunate that they are born into these wartime or war regions, and that children should have children should have an absolute and protection by the government, and which is also including things such as more universal education in primary school and whatsoever. Now, the primary reason these children are having to be forced to do these war crimes is that government has failed on multiple levels. First, they caused the war as characterized by the opening opposition and the closing opposition because of these adults. Well, adults didn't actually cause the war, but they actually voted in power for these politicians to actually engage in these policies that led to these wartime war trials and these wartime situations. And also, these governments and the adults actually dragged the children into war, first because they lacked adults in the military, or they lacked capital to hire other adults, or other, the hired soldiers, the mercenaries, and secondly, because they forced these children to be in war operations, maybe because they were smaller to fit into little cradles and shoot other people and all those kind of stuff. Because these children have exclusive benefits rather than adults, these adults actually manipulated and inculcated these values into the adults. No, thank you, sir. Yes. And moving on to the second point regarding the yes, because these children have exclusive benefits comparative to these adults, that is why certain governments and certain adults have actually manipulated these children, and that is why these children need to be protected in these cases by implementing limitations that are set strong from the foreground before the trials even start, as the opposition keep repeating without any logical whatsoever. Moving on to the exclusive extension that the closing opposition have brought to you. Now, the children are still learning, and they're still still in the process of shaping their identity and personality into the children. Now, why is this very harmful if we try these children the same and give the same punishment to these children as the same as adults? Please no, thank you. And yes, because these children are very young and they have to go through a lifetime of these of rotting in jail and they have like more time to live. Now, these children are meant to, and they're prone to suffer more from these internal harms and the damage done to them, because instead of being educated proper values and more decorous values in school, these children are educated values on the world field. They will keep and bring that value forever until they die, until they die of old age in prison whatsoever, and they are made to suffer for longer periods of time compared to these adults who have in most cases are military generals, age over 40, or these other conscripted members, age over 20, in which these cases have relatively less amount of period of time to suffer. From the closing
You need a clear context. So you say that children are shaping this ideology, but it is in a time of war, so it is hard to conceptualize morality, but you still want to differentiate them. What is your context?
I don't get your point, sir. You said that these children, I said that these children learn their values. They're still learning their values, and they're placed in these war crimes, in these battlefields. They will take these values, and they will be educated in these war fields, and then they will take these values until the grave, and that is why they are made to suffer for longer periods of time, and so on whatsoever. Now, the impact of opposing this motion. Now, the impact that we leave on the children, these are thought that if they are tried the same and they're given the same amount of punishment to the adults, they're gonna plant a narrative to these children that we used you well, so now you are punished the same, and you guys don't mean nothing to us. Versus a narrative that, sorry to have used you in war, you don't deserve the same punishment as these adults. This leads to a more humanistic understanding of the circumstances and give a better chance of these children to redeem themselves, to forgive themselves, and maybe to turn into a kinder person and whatnot. And there are more chances of these youths taking on leading positions in terrorist groups, leading more violent war crimes later on, once they are freed from their jail, once they have ended their punishment in these jails. That is another exclusive point that the opposing opposition has brought to you, which is another further danger of the motion that the government is trying to propose. And that is why we are very clear and proud to go into the finals.
Okay, thanks very much. Very good job. You can go back to where the location is. You'll follow what's there. Can someone stop this?
너무 많이 했습니다.